The name's Bond. James Bond.
The name's more. Movies and more. So that cringe intro out of the way, thank you so much for coming back to the channel where we love talking about movies and more. I'm your host, Mason Phillips, and this year we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Casino Royale, the introduction to Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond. Before we get any further in this video, I want to ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified when new videos go live to this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, James Bond. This is a series that I have always had an appreciation for, but I can't say it's ever been at the tip top of my fandom. I have seen all of the Daniel Craig films. I've seen all of the Eon canon Sean Connery films, meaning I haven't seen Never Say Never Again, which is not an Eon production. I've seen 2 Roger Moore films, and recently saw the first 2 Pierce Brosnan James Bond films, and I've also seen the George Lazenby on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I have not seen the 2 Timothy Dalton films. I haven't seen the final 2 Pierce Brosnan films just yet, and the vast majority of Roger Moore's tenure I have not checked out either. So there's a lot of missing components to me catching up on the James Bond franchise. However, in recent years, I've gotten a much more eager anticipation to dive back into the franchise, especially with the new James Bond film on the way and the new game coming out very soon with 007 First Light about to hit consoles and PC. So I have kind of had this resurgence of love for the James Bond series, going back into movies, recently rewatching Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, and then watching the first 2 Pierce Brosnan films, GoldenEye and Tomorrow Never Dies, getting this appreciation for a character that I've always enjoyed, but have never really had this diehard fandom for. However, the exception to all of that is where the Daniel Craig Bond films are concerned. I do thoroughly love these films. All 5 of his films I have varying levels of love for. I know Quantum of Solace isn't super loved by the fandom. I know that Spectre definitely isn't super loved by the fandom, but I have an appreciation for all of the films. Even No Time to Die is a controversial ending for Daniel Craig's Bond, but I tend to really appreciate what that film did for the character. Is it the best film in the series? No, but we're not here to talk about No Time to Die. We're here to talk about Casino Royale, the 20th anniversary of this renewal, this recharge of the James Bond series. It really took Bond in a different direction. After Die Another Day, the final Pierce Brosnan film, the Bond franchise was in a bit of a rocky state. Yes, the film made a lot of money at the box office, but was not received very well by either the fans or the critics. So the Bond series needed another refresh. And with that came a new actor and a new take on the character. So here comes Daniel Craig as James Bond, replacing Pierce Brosnan in the title role. With Casino Royale, it did something with the Bond franchise that I don't think a lot of people were really ready for. A lot of Bond fans may have not been quite ready for this film because it does things that are a little different than the previous Bond films had. It kind of changes the formula, but in a way that I think is also respectful of the Bond formula. It does make a few digs at the classic Bond tropes, like the shaken not stirred term for the martini.
Vodka martini. Shaken and stirred. Do I look like I give a damn?
Changes the gun barrel sequence at the opening of the film. I think that it's an acceptable change since it's the beginning of the Bond franchise, a new outing for this character, and it's the origin story for James Bond when you really think about it, just now earning his 007 status. It puts the Bond theme at the very end of the film instead of the beginning and throughout.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
We don't have Q in this film, we don't have Moneypenny in this film, so we have some elements of the Bond series that are missing, but with this new restructuring of the character, it all somehow works, and a lot of that is attributed to the director, the person behind the camera on this film, Martin Campbell, who had previously directed Pierce Brosnan's original outing in GoldenEye, coming back and doing it again once more, relaunching the character again in Casino Royale, and this time actually having to do a lot more work than he had to do with GoldenEye. GoldenEye was still kind of staying in that continuity that was established with Sean Connery's Bond. However, with Daniel Craig's Bond, it completely starts from scratch with the exception of carrying over Judi Dench, who had played M in the Brosnan films, plays M once more in the Craig films. However, the continuity has been completely changed, and they've started essentially from scratch with Craig's Bond. And I think that really works and honestly served the character better than it would have had they stayed in the same continuity as the previous Bond films. Maybe you could have explained that this was some kind of prequel in the Bond series, just taking place before the Connery films, or at least before the Brosnan films, and an argument can be made for that. However, these films do truly stand on their own because the entire Craig era has this long-running story arc with the Spectre organization, with characters like Mr. White, with characters like Blofeld, later revealed in Spectre, and there's this overarching plot line that's established throughout the Craig films that is not really present in the rest of the Bond films. And it's really the first time they've done that in the Bond series, but with Casino Royale specifically, they went back to the basics of this character, and it's the first time they truly adapted that original Ian Fleming novel of Casino Royale. It had been adapted in a spoof version in the 1960s. That movie has been wildly derided as possibly the worst film in the series. I haven't seen it personally, but I haven't heard any love for this from anyone in the Bond fan community. So this is the movie that really truly adapted that original Ian Fleming novel. And yes, had to make some changes to adapt with the times, and now having a modernized version of it, well, 20 years ago, modern version of the Casino Royale story for Daniel Craig's first outing as James Bond. And I think this movie, it really works on so many levels, not just for Bond fans and not just for the Bond character, but also works for people who aren't necessarily huge James Bond fans, like myself. I'm becoming more of a James Bond fan. I have a much greater appreciation for the series and this character than I ever had before. However, I can't say I'm a diehard Bond fan. There's still many films in the series that I have yet to watch. But this movie, it really works as a spy thriller, as an origin story. It works as a great love story between Vesper Lynd and James Bond. And I think that's where it also works, and it gives layers to characters that were usually more like props or just maybe side characters in the previous Bond films. The Bond girl was always just kind of this added addition to the James Bond series. It was at times pivotal to the plot, but at the end of the day, it was Bond's story, and the Bond girl was just this kind of extra character tacked onto the story. Wasn't really this pivotal person in Bond's life. With Vesper Lynd, that changes. She is somebody who's very pivotal to Bond, challenges Bond as a person, as a character, and can really stand toe-to-toe with James Bond. Maybe not so much in the action elements of James Bond, but as a character, somebody who can stand toe-to-toe with him in a battle of wits, can really exchange this really sharp, witty dialogue and stand toe-to-toe with him emotionally as a character. I think that's where the character of Vesper Lynd really alters the look of how us as an audience are to view the Bond girl. So it does improve in that aspect. I think it makes the Bond girl more important. And this movie also builds upon James Bond's character. We've never really had a character arc for James Bond. He's never really meant to adapt or change or grow as a person. From film to film, he's really supposed to be the same person, the suave British spy. People are just toys to him or a means to an end. There's no growth for this person, and in Casino Royale, James Bond's character is challenged, and a lot of that is also attributed to the early stages of this character, where he starts. He hasn't really grown into the Bond that we know Pierce Brosnan or Roger Moore or Sean Connery or Timothy Dalton or these past Bonds to be. He's still becoming Bond. He's not quite the James Bond that we know from the previous films. It's not even until the end of the film where he utters the classic line, Bond, James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
He hasn't said that until the very end of the film. So you don't really get that full view, the full picture of James Bond until you get to the very end of the film, when he's had some heartbreak, when he's had some character growth, and certain things have happened to him to shape him into the James Bond that we are familiar with. So that's what this movie does so well, is it just goes deeper and does more with Bond than any of the other films had done before. And I like a classic spy action adventure romp. That's fine, and I do enjoy those James Bond isms, the gadgets, the cars, the Bond girl, all this extra stuff. that comes with the James Bond character, and really we come to expect with the James Bond character. But with Casino Royale, it reinvents it in a way that makes it more interesting and really makes it the most appetizing experience I've had with a James Bond film, and is why Casino Royale is my favorite film in the entire Bond franchise. Yes, in Daniel Craig's tenure, but the entire series overall. And it's what I'm hoping that Denis Villeneuve is going to do in some aspects with his new Bond film. However, I would like to see a lot of those classic Bond-isms carry over in what he's going to do with the series, really diving deep into these characters, and so I have no concern there. I think he's going to be able to do that, and it's what I love so much about this film. And a lot of this is in part to how Daniel Craig portrays the character. He is my favorite Bond actor. Daniel Craig, I think, brings something to the character that a lot of the Bond actors in the past haven't. That's not to say that they never could, but I don't think they were ever given the material that Craig was given in his tenure as Bond. He was always allowed to experiment with the character, more so than any of the other actors before him had, so he was able to really kind of make this character his own in a way that the other Bond actors before him hadn't been able to before. And like I said earlier, the only thing that was carried over as far as characters or actor portrayals of these characters had been from previous entries in the Bond series was Judi Dench as M, and I think it's a perfect carryover. She really is able to challenge Bond, corral him, also act as an ally to him, as a mother figure to Bond, and their chemistry, I think, is better than what she had with Pierce Brosnan. I like the interactions that she's had with Pierce Brosnan. Again, coming from somebody who hasn't seen The World Is Not Enough or Die Another Day. I have seen the first two though, and I never really got this feeling that she had respect for Bond. She knows she can use him as an effective tool, but I never really got that she had this underlying respect for Bond. She has that with Craig's Bond, and yes, there's times when he'll go rogue, she's trying to corral him, but at the end of the day, she is able to respect the direction that he's going in, and really sees that his way may be better than what MI6 as an organization is able to get behind. Maybe it's not necessarily how she would do it, but she can respect how Bond is going to do it because that's the tool that he is. That's who he is. He's this asset that MI6 has in their back pocket that they can use in a way that may be a little unorthodox, but gets the job done at the end of the day and is what they need at the end of the day. So I think she has a better rapport with Craig's Bond than she had with Brosnan's Bond. It just brings something different to the table that I really appreciated. Other elements to this film that worked in an amazing way is the music, the score. For one, that opening score for Casino Royale is probably one of my favorites. And not just from the music aspect, but it's also just visually entertaining. David Arnold, the composer of this film, up to this point, he composed 3 Bond films before this: Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. Also went on to do this film and Quantum of Solace as well. And I think he really gets it. He gets the essence of that James Bond score, knows when to use the big themes, when not to use the big themes, and they're implemented in a way that doesn't distract, but adds to the film, adds to the scenery. It's like when a cinematographer knows how to add certain bits of lighting and make a scene pop. Those audio pops that you get with David Arnold's score really help to sell the film and package the film. It just ties it all up in a nice, appetizing package that I love what he does with the score here. And of course, that intro song, the You Know My Name intro to this film, is one of my favorite, is in the top 5, I think, of James Bond intros. Again, coming from somebody who hasn't seen the entire repertoire of James Bond films, but I have seen all the Craig films. And of at least all the Craig films, Casino Royale's intro is up there with even intros like Skyfall and even intros like No Time to Die. I really like that intro for No Time to Die. But I think Casino Royale is up there. It might be my favorite. I don't know for sure, but it might be my favorite. It's slightly edging out Skyfall. So David Arnold's score and what he does with it is just a cherry on top to the entire Casino Royale experience. And then not even to mention Mads Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre in this film as the Bond villain, and brings some of those interesting Bond tropes that carry over from those older Bond films. A very distinguished villain, but kind of an underplayed villain too, or rather understated villain, in that I think he's really great as a Bond villain, but not super over the top or bombastic, and that's what I also appreciated with this. I can enjoy the campy aspects of the older Bond films, even getting into that recently with the Brosnan films, but I think I like it more when a villain can stay understated but also terrifying, and they're just a little bit more layered nuances to him. Now, the plot of what he's trying to do, it can be a little confusing, but it's still very entertaining. The whole back and forth that he has with Craig's Bond when they're playing poker, that whole scene is just so intense, and a scene that doesn't have any action, just a lot of dialogue, a lot of little subtle nuances in how they're reacting to each other's plays, and that's some stuff that I just chew up. I love that tension that is built in the game, and then the little breaks that they make in between just helps to build the tension of the entire experience. And it's just a film that every time I rewatch it, I just have a greater appreciation for it. I don't tend to go back and rewatch a lot of Bond films, and it's one in the past that I've always appreciated. Maybe it wasn't my favorite. For the longest time, I would have said Skyfall was my favorite Daniel Craig Bond film. I would have said that was my favorite Bond film, period. And then actually at one point, I even said that Quantum of Solace was my favorite, and then at one point said that Spectre was my favorite. I'm sorry if that offends any of you true Bond fans, you diehard Bond fans out there. That's just how these films hit with me. Upon rewatching Casino Royale, though, it's clear this is my favorite Daniel Craig Bond film, my favorite Bond film in the entire series, and it's just what I said before, how it reinvented the character, what Daniel Craig was able to do with the role. I know there was some controversy when he was cast, the blonde not Bond or not my Bond stuff going on in 2006. I wasn't aware of any of that when this film was coming out. I wasn't following any of the fandoms online. I really wasn't online much at that point anyway in my life. I was pretty young when this film came out. I was only 9 years old when this film came out, so I wasn't really following the online trends or the online traffic where this film was concerned, so I never really got the controversy that came with Craig being cast. I can kind of see that now as we're getting into a new era when somebody else is about to be cast as James Bond, and I'm sure that conversation will probably come up again when a certain actor is cast as our next James Bond. There will be people that will obviously say that's not my Bond, but if we can get past the noise, Daniel Craig has proven, and every James Bond actor in the past has proven, if we just give them a chance, they can easily surprise us with what they bring to the table. So this film is just, it was a pleasure to revisit, and I am so happy that this film exists in the way that it does. Craig's tenure may not be perfect, but it is, I think, 10 times more interesting, in my opinion, than any of the previous eras in the James Bond series. So a lot of rambling out of the way, but Casino Royale is definitely not only my favorite in Craig's tenure as Bond, but my favorite film in the entire James Bond series. If you like what I said here, if you like this video, go down in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. If you didn't like it, go down in the comment section and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to have that conversation with you about this wonderful piece of the James Bond franchise. Also, a little housekeeping, I recently started a gaming channel, so if you are a fan of video games, if you like playing video games, talking about video games, go join me over on MP Games and More. That's where I talk about my love of games. Recently did a video on the 10th anniversary of Uncharted 4, so please go check out that video. Go check out that channel after you get done watching this video. I'd really appreciate it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live to this channel. When you do that, it always helps me out, and I also would greatly appreciate that. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.